Israel was surrounded by enemies, and war could break out at any time. At that time, Saul ruled Israel as king, but every king needed someone to command the army. Saul chose his own cousin, Abner, to lead Israel's soldiers into battle. Every war Saul fought, Abner planned it. Every council Saul held, Abner stood in it. During Saul's reign, Israel was at war with the Philistines. But the Philistines weren't normal soldiers. They were trained killers, powerful soldiers, and among them stood one terrifying weapon unlike anything Israel had ever faced before, a giant named Goliath. Before any battle, Abner walked the ranks himself, checking spear points, checking which units were under strength, deciding where each tribe's men would stand in the line. Then the Philistines lined up at Elah. The giant walked into the gap between the armies and shouted a challenge every morning.
"I defy the armies of Israel! Send me a man to fight!"
Nobody stepped forward. 40 days of the same shout, the same silence, the same soldiers staring at their feet, while Abner watched from the ranks with no answer to give his king. A shepherd boy named David did. He stepped forward and challenged the giant all by himself. King Saul was sitting at his throne with Abner by his side, watching the battle closely. Saul turned to Abner. "Whose son is this?" he asked. Abner didn't know. He had no report on the boy at all. Minutes later, the giant was dead. Abner walked out onto the field himself and brought the boy in front of Saul, past soldiers who moments earlier had been too frightened to step forward. His name was David. David rose fast after that, too fast. Saul's jealousy hardened into something dangerous, and Abner did what he'd always done. Saul had made his decision. David had to die. From that moment on, Abner became one of the men responsible for carrying out the king's orders. He organized the army, followed every report about David's whereabouts, and led Israel's soldiers wherever Saul believed David could be found. One night at Hachilah, Saul's army camped on a hillside. Abner slept close to the king, a spear planted beside Saul's head, a water jug within reach. By every measure, Abner knew the camp was secure. Nobody noticed David walk in. He came down from the ridge, moved past every sleeping guard, stood over Saul, and left again without anybody noticing him, carrying the spear and the jug with him. At dawn, David stood on a distant hillside across the ravine, safely beyond the army's reach. He called out to Abner, "Who guards the king?" Then he held up Saul's missing spear. Abner needed no answer. The spear was proof that David had entered the camp, reached the sleeping king, and escaped without anyone stopping him. Before Saul's men could reach him, David turned and disappeared into the wilderness. Abner kept commanding anyway. Saul kept chasing David anyway. Nothing changed. Not long afterward, the Philistines gathered one of the largest armies Israel had ever faced. They marched toward Mount Gilboa, forcing Saul to gather his own army and prepare for battle once again. The lines broke. The battle at Mount Gilboa quickly turned against Israel. Abner rode across the battlefield, shouting orders as he tried to keep the army together. But the Philistines kept pushing forward. Then, the enemy archers found King Saul. Abner fought his way back toward the king, but the fighting had already reached the royal family. Saul's sons fell one after another, including Jonathan. Saul was badly wounded. As the Philistines closed in, Saul knew he would soon be captured. He asked his armor-bearer to kill him, but the man refused. Rather than fall alive into enemy hands, Saul threw himself onto his own sword. By the time Abner reached the king, it was already too late. King Saul was dead. As the battle was lost, the surviving Israelite soldiers fled into the darkness. Small groups ran toward the Jordan River, hoping to escape the Philistines. Their army had fallen apart. There were no battle lines anymore, only frightened men trying to stay alive. Abner didn't wait to see the body. He pulled his surviving men off the mountain. He crossed the Jordan before the Philistines could close the net. He reached Mahanaim, far enough east of the Jordan that no Philistine patrol would find it before winter. With Saul dead, Israel had no king. The kingdom was leaderless, and someone had to take the throne. Abner turned to Ishbosheth, Saul's last surviving son, who had been kept far from the fighting. Abner brought him in. He didn't call an assembly. He didn't wait for the tribes to vote on it. He set the crown on Ishbosheth's head himself in front of the officers who still answered to him. The soldiers followed because Abner told them to follow. Ishbosheth became king, but he was not a strong ruler. Whenever an important decision had to be made, people looked to Abner instead. He commanded the army, defended the kingdom, and became the most powerful man in Israel after the king himself. That coronation split the nation in two. Judah had already crowned someone else in Hebron, David, the same shepherd Abner had once walked out to meet on a battlefield. Abner crowned Saul's son Ishbosheth over the rest of the tribes. From that moment, Israel was divided between two rival kings. 2 kings, 1 kingdom. When Abner heard that Judah had crowned David king, he knew Israel now had 2 rival kings. He gathered Ishbosheth's army and prepared for war. Word spread through both camps that war was coming. Villages near the border doubled their watchmen. Raiding parties crossed at night, burned granaries, drove off cattle before sunrise. Every marketplace carried rumors about which commander was moving where. Abner moved first. He marched his men to the pool of Gibeon. Joab, David's commander, met him there with a column of his own. Neither side attacked. Neither side backed off. Men on both banks gripped their weapons and waited for one commander to give the first order. Abner spoke first. "Let the young men fight before us," he said. 12 on each side. Joab agreed. 24 soldiers stepped into the open ground. Each one grabbed his opponent by the head. Each one drove a blade into the other's side. All 24 dropped together in the same patch of dirt. Soldiers on both banks went silent, staring at the pile of bodies. The contest solved nothing. The real battle started right after it. Abner's men broke first. They ran. Joab's men chased across the open fields behind them. One runner outpaced everyone, Asahel, Joab's younger brother, fast as a wild deer across open ground. He scanned the fleeing line, picked one target, and locked onto it. Abner. Abner looked back over his shoulder. He recognized him instantly. "Turn aside!" he shouted. "Take someone else's armor! Leave me!" Asahel kept coming, closing the gap with every stride. Ignoring the warning, Abner shouted again, louder this time. "Stop, or I will kill you! And if I kill you, I can never face your brother again!" Asahel didn't stop. He had a straight shot at Israel's commander, and he wasn't giving it up. Abner made the call. He planted his spear butt into the ground and let momentum finish it. Asahel ran straight onto the point. It went through him. He dropped where he stood, still holding his sword. Every soldier who reached the body afterward stopped running and stared down at it before continuing the chase and looked at the dead body of Asahel. Joab and Abishai didn't stop. They kept chasing Abner across the fields as the light dropped, past burned-out huts. Abner led the surviving soldiers to the top of a nearby hill. They stopped there, turned to face their enemies, and stood together with their swords drawn as Joab and his men climbed toward them. Abner stepped forward and called down one last time.
"Must the sword keep destroying our people forever? Look how bitter the next day will become. We are chasing our own brothers.
Joab waited for a moment. Then he raised a trumpet and blew it. The chase ended. Both sides turned home carrying their dead. Joab carried something else back with him too, a name to settle later. His men buried Asahel that same night in his father's tomb in Bethlehem. And Joab walked the whole distance behind the body without saying a word to anyone. That night, both armies camped not far from each other. Years passed. No one knew if the fighting would begin again the next morning. Raid answered raid along the border. Then the raids stopped for a season and started again. The war did not end after that first battle. Month after month, Abner led Ishbosheth's army into battle. But while the war continued, something slowly began to change. David's kingdom grew stronger with every passing year, while Ishbosheth's kingdom slowly grew weaker. Then he made a move that changed everything. He took Rizpah, one of Saul's former concubines, for himself. In that world, that wasn't romance. That was a claim on the throne itself. Ishbosheth heard about it. He confronted Abner directly. "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" the young king asked. Abner was furious. "After everything I've done to keep you on this throne," he said, "you're accusing me because of one woman?" Ishbosheth said nothing back. He couldn't afford to. Abner was the only thing keeping his crown on his head, and both men in that room knew it. The king watched Abner walk out of the hall without another word, and he had no way to call him back. But something in Abner had already snapped. He decided right there he would tear the kingdom away from Saul's house himself and hand it to David. That was the moment Abner made his decision. If Ishbosheth no longer trusted him, then he would no longer fight for Ishbosheth's throne. He swore that he would help give the kingdom to David, just as the Lord had promised, which would be his biggest mistake that eventually would lead to his own death. Not long afterward, Abner sent messengers to David in Hebron. They carried a simple offer: "Make a covenant with me, and I bring all of Israel to your side." David's answer came back with one condition attached: "Bring Michal, Saul's daughter, David's first wife, back to me first." No agreement without her. Abner accepted. Michal was taken from her husband Paltiel. He followed the procession weeping down the road, refusing to let her go, until Abner turned in his saddle and ordered him home. Paltiel stopped in the road, watched the column ride on without him, and turned back. News of it reached the marketplaces before the dust settled. Traders passed the story from stall to stall. Abner was turning. Abner did more than send a message. He traveled throughout Israel himself, meeting with the leaders of the tribes one by one. He reminded them that they had wanted David as king for a long time. Now, he told them, was the time to make it happen. Many of the elders listened. Years of fighting had brought little but loss, and they were ready for peace. Abner also met with the leaders of Benjamin, Saul's own tribe. Winning their support would be the hardest part, but Abner's influence carried great weight among them. When he had finished speaking with the tribes, Abner traveled to Hebron with 20 men to meet David face to face. He stood in front of David. David set a feast for him. 20 men and their commander eating at the king's own table, servants moving between them with bread and wine, like the war had never happened. Guards who had fought Abner's men at Gibeon stood along the walls, watching the man who had killed their comrades eat as an honored guest. Abner laid out the plan across that table. "I will gather all of Israel," he said. "You will rule everything your heart wants." David sent him away in peace. No threats, no delay. He walked Abner to the gate himself and watched the column ride north before turning back inside. The city was still buzzing about it when a second column rode through the gate. Joab, back from a raid he'd been leading elsewhere. Joab learned what happened while he was gone. He went straight to David, furious. He still hadn't forgotten that Abner had killed his little brother Asahel. "Abner came to spy on you," he said. "He came to deceive you." David gave him no answer that satisfied him. Joab left the king's tent and walked the length of the camp alone. By the time he stopped walking, he'd already decided. So Joab acted on his own. He sent riders after Abner. They rode hard and caught him at the well of Sirah, still within sight of Hebron's walls, Abner's column already slowing to make camp for the night. They told him David wanted one more word before he left. Abner had no reason to doubt it. He turned his column around. He rode back through the same gate he'd ridden out of in peace only hours earlier. Joab was waiting inside. He pulled Abner aside like it was a private conversation between two commanders, one hand on his shoulder, walking him a few steps from the gate. Then he drove a blade into Abner's stomach. Abner dropped in the gateway, dead. Killed for Asahel's blood, killed by the brother of the man he'd warned twice to turn aside. Word reached David before sunset. David was devastated. David publicly declared that he was innocent of Abner's death. He placed the blame entirely on Joab and pronounced a curse on Joab's family for what they had done. "May it never leave Joab's house," David said. "Not a man who limps, not a man who falls by the sword, not a man who goes hungry." He ordered Joab and every man with him to tear their clothes, put on sackcloth, and walk in mourning in front of the body through the streets of Hebron. David personally walked behind Abner's funeral procession until they reached the grave. At Abner's grave, David wept openly. He mourned the death of a man who had not deserved to die that way, and everyone there wept with him. The people came and urged him to eat something before nightfall, the custom after a burial. David refused. He swore publicly he wouldn't touch food until the sun went down, no matter who asked him. The people noticed. Their king had wanted no part in this killing, and he was making certain every person in Hebron understood that before the day ended. You saw Abner's rise and fall, but the Bible hides one surprising detail that completely changes how we understand his decisions. Let's uncover the forgotten message. The Bible tells us that Abner already knew God had chosen David to become king. Yet, he kept fighting for Saul's family instead. It wasn't until Ishbosheth accused him that Abner finally decided to support David. How often do we do the same thing? Sometimes we know the right decision, but we keep putting it off. We know we should forgive someone, but we wait. We know we should spend more time with God, but we say, "I'll start tomorrow." We know we should stop a certain sin, but we keep making excuses. Abner reminds us that delayed obedience can cost us. By resisting God's plan, he walked a path that eventually led to his own death. One thing many people miss about Abner is that he wasn't an evil man. He was a loyal man. He spent years serving King Saul and protecting Saul's family. Loyalty is usually a good thing, but sometimes even a good thing can become the wrong thing if it keeps us from following God's plan. Another lesson comes from his pride. When Ishbosheth questioned him, Abner became furious. Instead of calmly answering, he let his anger make the decision for him. Have you ever said something you later regretted because you were angry? Most of us have. One emotional decision can change the direction of our lives. Abner also teaches us that our actions affect other people. Because he continued fighting against David, the civil war lasted for years. Thousands of Israelites died fighting fellow Israelites. Imagine how different things might have been if Abner had followed God's plan sooner. But there is hope in his story. When Abner finally decided to support David, he did everything he could to unite the nation. Even though he died before seeing Israel become one kingdom, God still used his work. David's reaction is another lesson. Even though Abner had been his enemy for years, David didn't celebrate his death. He cried for him, he honored him, he called him a great commander. That reminds us not to rejoice when our enemies fall, but to treat others with mercy and honor. So what can we learn from Abner? Don't wait to do what you know is right. Don't let pride make your decisions. Stay loyal, but be loyal to God before anyone else. And remember that even small acts of obedience today can have an impact that lasts far beyond your own lifetime. Those are the lessons Abner's life leaves behind. Perhaps the greatest lesson we can learn from Abner is this: don't wait until life forces you to change. Abner knew that God had chosen David to be Israel's next king, yet he continued supporting Saul's house for years. It wasn't until his relationship with Ishbosheth fell apart that he finally decided to stand with God's plan. We know what God is asking of us, but we keep saying, "I'll do it later." We wait for a better time, for the right opportunity, or for life to become easier. Sometimes it takes a broken relationship, a painful failure, a financial struggle, or a personal crisis before we finally turn back to God. But why wait until everything falls apart? God doesn't want us to follow Him only when we have no other choice. He wants willing hearts that trust Him before the storm comes. Abner eventually made the right decision, but by then years of war had already passed. Countless lives had been lost, and he never lived to see the united kingdom he helped make possible. His story reminds us that delaying obedience can leave us with regrets that obedience today could have prevented. If there is something God has been placing on your heart, whether it's forgiving someone, letting go of a sinful habit, spending more time with Him, or simply taking the next step of faith, don't keep putting it off. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Learn from Abner's story. Don't wait until circumstances force you to change. Choose to trust God today, because His plans are always better than our own,